Mr. Cohen, would you vote to repeal the tax? And if you would, what would you recommend to rein in the MTA spending?
Well, first of all, yes, I would vote to repeal the tax. I think the MTA payroll tax is the wrong tax at the wrong time. It clearly is impacting on small businesses and businesses throughout the 12-county area. There's no the logic of putting a payroll tax in the Great Recession, as we've been calling it, is a clear mistake. I would have voted against it. I'd also point out that one of the points that Senator Oppenheimer had made was that she complained that the Republicans did not support her in this bill. Although I'm not in the Senate, it seems to me that what she's saying is that if there were more people that had voted for it, then she would have had more cover in voting for it, as opposed to being the 32nd vote. But reality is that if she did not support it, if she had voted against it, we would not have the MTA payroll tax at this time. So it was her final vote that gave us the MTA payroll tax. You had a second question?
Yes, I did. If you vote to repeal the tax, what would you suggest to rein in the MTA?
Yes, I think that we need to do a top-to-bottom audit of the MTA and find really where the huge amount of money that we're spending for the MTA is going. Auditing would allow us to see exactly where, obviously, expenditures are made. One of the things that I have been looking at and other jurisdictions have looked into is privatizing the bus routes for the MTA. There's an estimate that could save approximately $1 billion, which would cover the lion's share of the MTA payroll tax. So there are other ways of doing it other than raising taxes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, my question deals with education, and I'll pose the first question to you, Senator. Education performance standards. We saw them lowered while you were chair. The development was enough that you were concerned enough to actually issue a probe on the subject, and when the more accurate standards were put in, the standards or the performance numbers, they dropped. In fact, per student funding, New Yorkers spend more than anyone, yet we rank 20th in the country, and the number has been going down. Why should people say that under your guidance, education in New York has improved?
Because this year, just a few months ago, we passed a landmark education reform bill taking into account that we were not pleased with the way things were going. And we have a whole different way now. We're going to be evaluating teachers. We're going to be teaching teachers. We're going to, if necessary, be dismissing teachers in a totally different way. And that takes a long time for me to discuss, but I'll be happy to go into more detail. We also are starting something called a longitudinal data study, and that study will follow every child from pre-K through college, through postgraduate, and hopefully to the jobs they're taking. We want to assist every child that we can, because we know in our inner cities, half of our children are not graduating from high school. And we cannot have that, because if they don't graduate from high school, they're going on a road to nowhere. Unfortunately, sometimes that road leads to prison, and we can't have that. We have to have every child that graduates. We have to get them to graduate, and we have to have them prepared either for a career or for college. And we understand that is our task now. We are revamping curriculum. We are revamping the way we teach teachers and the way we evaluate teachers. And it's going to be a big difference that will occur, I think, in the next couple of years, particularly with the longitudinal data study.
Just a couple quick follow-ups. One is, in a short answer, in your time in the committee, and I grant you've only chaired it for the past year and a half, are you proud of your record when you look at how New York is competing both nationally and the test performances of students in New York? Are you proud of the numbers that we look at today?
No, we would not have done this landmark education reform where we are actually having the teachers permit what occurs in the classroom, how their children are achieving. It is now part of the teacher evaluation that they fought for quite a while on, and they realized that we were having some problems here. Mind you, we're not the only state with problems, and mind you, we are a state with a very, very diverse population.
Understood. I want to give you an opportunity, though, to respond to one other criticism relating to education that you've heard throughout the campaign, and that is simply that you're bought and paid for by the teachers union, that they come first before students and taxpayers. What's your response to that?
I truly do not believe I have ever in my years in the Senate been in anyone's pocket. So I would have to say I find that perhaps something that is said by my opponents. But if I could use another minute, please, because I was cut off before.
Well, but I'm sorry, just on the time question, we want to also bring your opponent also into the education question. My question for you, Ms. Cohen's a little bit of a different one, and it is, you've said that you wouldn't have approved the cuts to spending in New York State in excess of $1.4 billion, but yet you support cutting taxes. Where's this funding coming from, as you say, in a great recession where you're going to keep all the funding for education but simultaneously cut people's taxes? Aren't you trying to have it both ways?
Is that for me or
That's for Mr. Cohen.
For Bob.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, let's take a step back and realize the budget issues that we face in the state of New York. We have a $138 billion budget, or approximately that at this point. We consistently look at the taxing side of that budget. There are two sides. There's the taxing side and there's the spending side. And for years, we have looked at the taxing side. We've raised taxes on businesses, we've raised taxes on people, we've raised taxes throughout the state. My feeling is that we can no longer continue to raise taxes in this state. We're literally taxing our people out of the state and taxing our businesses out of the state. So I would like to see a spending cap initially of 2%, a property tax cap of 2%, and also a statewide spending cap so that we could slow down this growth of spending. And specifically to your question of where are we going to make up the $1.4 billion, that was a question of priorities. Senator Oppenheimer voted for a budget, this last budget, which actually increased taxes, increased spending, increased borrowing, did not deal with our long-term problems, and cut aid to education by $1.4 billion. That's a question of priorities because we actually spent more money. The other part of that is that by cutting aid to education by $1.4 billion, we're actually shifting that cost to the local school districts. And those are then raising taxes to make up for that. So,
but with due respect, I don't think anybody in the state legislature wanted to cut $1.4 billion out of education. They did it because they were between bad and worse choices. Where would you find $1.4 billion if you're not going to cut education, but yet you want to cut taxes, want to reduce the revenue to the state, but you want to keep spending at a level even higher than your Democratic opponent?
it's a question of priorities.
But what are yours where you would find the offset?
I would say we could start with something like off-track betting. We currently subsidize off-track betting in the state of New York. There's the Manhattan Institute study that says that off-track betting could literally be sold for $300 to $400 million. We could look at the Wicks law, which is something that I believe should be repealed. It's costing us in this state between 20% and 30% on every construction project in the state of New York. There are ways that we can begin to prioritize our spending, prioritize the things that where we want to spend money, and then eliminate those items at the bottom of that list where we don't want to spend money or we don't have the money on.